That's Sol Wisenberg, the former Whitewater deputy independent counsel. Sol, very good to have you, and thank you for taking the time. You know, it's interesting that Jack Smith, the prosecutor here, wants a quick trial, ASAP. You raise the issue that if you're Donald Trump, you don't. So where do you see this going?
I think it's very unlikely that this case will go to trial before the election, and I think it's quite possible this case will never go to trial. Certainly, now, if Donald Trump wants to do what Ted Stevens did and insist on a speedy trial right away, he could certainly do that. I think it would be a tremendous mistake. This is a winnable case. He's got a good jury veneer pool to choose from. He's got a favorable judge, and certainly, if this goes in the course of what a typical federal criminal trial in Miami would go, particularly one where the attorneys will need security clearances, it's called CIPA clearances, it's just going to simply take a while, and then you're going to be up against the trial date that's already set in New York, and then you're going to be up against the presidential election. So nobody is going to force him to go to trial too early here, Neil.
So were you referring to the former Alaska Senator Ted Stevens and the quick trial? Could you maybe explain that?
Yeah, Ted Stevens was indicted, and he was the sitting senator from Alaska, the Republican senator. He was indicted by the Department of Justice, the Public Integrity section that Jack Smith headed up at one time. I don't think he headed it up then. And he insisted, he said, I've got an election coming up. I want a speedy trial. I want my trial within 70 days. And they did it, and they convicted him, but they were so discombobulated, and they withheld exculpatory evidence that he ended up having the case overthrown, and he was vindicated. Unfortunately, not before he lost the election. I'm
just wondering then, there's no benefit for Donald Trump rushing any of this, but a couple of very quick dumb questions for you, Sol. What if the president is convicted in any one of these cases that could come up before the election? Because there are more that are waiting, particularly looking into the Georgia recount, of whether the president was involved in trying to change the 2020 election itself. We can go to January 6th. But even the cases pending now, if any of them result in convictions, can he still run for president as a convicted felon?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's nothing in the Constitution that prohibits that. He could run from prison.
Really? I've heard that, and I just find it, that would be wild, to put it mildly. But so none of this would get in the way of him still serving as president, even from a jail cell if it came from that. But in a jail cell as president, I'm taking these leaps here, just trying to play it out in my head. Could he pardon himself then, and he walks out of that jail cell?
Well, he could never pardon himself from a state conviction, right? There's an open question as to whether or not a president can pardon himself for a federal conviction, but the president has no pardon power with respect to state convictions. And back to your previous point, yeah, there would certainly be logistical difficulties and issues, but we have this thing in the Constitution called the Supremacy Clause. He would be the president if he's elected again, and there is nothing that would prohibit him from being charged or convicted and running for that office. Nothing in the Constitution.
Amazing. Now, it would be in his interest to try to resolve or settle the state cases, or you know, cop a plea or something to avoid jail time, I guess. But on this particular case, the one that's going to be brought up today and these 37 counts, it's not as easy. Or explain how that would go if he wanted to make a deal.
Well, I don't see him making a deal on any criminal case if the deal involved him admitting to a crime. Does he strike you as the kind of person who's likely to admit to a crime? State, federal, criminal accusation, even jaywalking? I don't think so. So, I mean, I think that's a non-starter. I don't see how he settles that. If settlement, you know, when a case is indicted and you talk about settlement, you generally talk about, unless you're a big corporation, you talk about, and even if you are a big corporation, you're talking about some admission of guilt with respect to some criminal count. I just don't see former President Trump doing that.
So in this particular case that he's being arraigned on today, it's go to trial whenever that is, or not.
Well, think about it this way. If it ever does go to trial, if a Republican if he's convicted, which is a big if, and a Republican is president, first of all, if he's president, he may pardon himself. If most Republicans who are in the field, if you believe what they say, if they're president, they're going to pardon him. It's even conceivable that a Democratic president, in the spirit of Gerald Ford, to save the country more civil strife, would pardon him. But I can tell you this: if they want to delay that case because of the election and because of the state case in New York, they are going to be able to do it. And I think it would be very foolish of him to rush in and try the case very quickly, because he's got a favorable judge, he's got a favorable venue. It's very likely there'll be some MAGA people sitting on that jury. And legally, he's got some issues as well. I'm not saying it would be a cakewalk at all. They're serious charges.
Right.
But he's got a lot to work with.
Yeah, all you need is one juror who says, "No, I'm not quite sure on any of these counts." Fascinating, Sol. Thank you very much. I learned a lot.
Thanks for having me.